Right,
You were the boss now.
Oh, okay, that's great. Well, thanks very much for coming in, Desmond. It's great to see you.
You're very welcome. Lovely to be back here.
Yeah, and it was lovely meeting Alice, somebody that was with the school from the very start as well.
I know.
You remembered her, yeah, she
Absolutely.
was delighted
Absolutely.
to see you. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at how the school was set up, and
Right.
I'm going to start off by asking, why did you think it was necessary to set up an Educate Together school or Dalkey School project?
Well, I had I'd lived in Canada for 9 years, and I was married there, and I married a woman who was a different religious faith than I was.
Yeah.
She was Episcopalian, which is effectively Church of Ireland when you come back here.
Right.
And I was raised as a Roman Catholic.
Right.
And the issues began then is how can we equally respect our children's heritage in the school, and how can they be educated in an environment in which her religion was equally respected to mine.
Yeah.
And there was really no provision for that, and it was because what the Catholic sort of ethos was dominant in Ireland, and it was very demanding, and it would insist that, of course, if you under the marriage laws, that the children would be raised as Roman Catholic, and the partner in those days had to promise that, and there was no acknowledgement that a belief system of a mother couldn't be expressed to the children, and that seemed crazy to me.
Right.
So I was sort of toying with that angst, if you like, about how do I resolve this, or how can I do it? How can I be respectful to that tradition as well as incorporating my own and be respectful to each of them?
Yeah.
And I was working in the city at that time, and my secretary was a woman called Marlene Bean. And Marlene happened to be friendly with the Johnsons, and she came in to me one day and she says, I have a very good idea for you, and you should get involved in something here. You should go to this meeting. It's about some of the things you've been talking about setting up a school in which all children are respected equally. So I said, oh, that's a great idea, Marlene, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I went to the thing that night, and of course, at the end of the meeting, I was treasurer of the organisation.
You got a job, great.
I got a job straight away.
Yeah.
And therefore, it was an immediate outlet for the things that had been sort of going on in doing this. And then, of course, you saw that it was a much wider issue than my personal issue, that there were many people had that, for a whole different variety of reasons.
Yeah.
It wasn't just because we had they call it mixed marriages in those days, but interfaith marriages or marriages of people who had different belief systems when they came together.
Yes.
And they needed those to be respected. So it was a very wide issue in society. Now, I think the background to what was happening in the north was music playing in the background, if you like, that the issues of the fights between the two religious groups up there were something that was of concern for us. But it became quite obvious to us fairly quickly, look at the issue is we have to solve the issue down here, not up there.
Yes.
And so if we can put something in place here in which all children are respected equally, and their backgrounds and the backgrounds of their parents are respected equally, then that's our job. It's not necessarily to solve, and that will be a model then.
Yes. And so what were the challenges that were involved?
There were massive challenges because, in fact, the system was it was universally around denomination, and there was no such thing as, if you like, a mixed school. I think there was mention of one school that had other religions in it.
Yes.
But everybody thought almost in a denominational fashion, and it was a faith within the Catholic Church that you would think in this denominational fashion. So that in fact everything had to be taught in a school through an ethos which was Catholic, or which was Church of Ireland, or which was Jewish. There weren't any Muslims there, so there was issues. So there's smaller issues of the smaller religions. There was really no opportunity for the dissenting religions, the Baptists, the Presbyterians, and all of that. Although there may have been one Presbyterian school, but there was no acknowledgement, in fact, that those traditions under our constitution had an equal right. So we grew to realise that actually this was the project.
Okay, that was great. Yeah. And then the practicalities, so that was the philosophical sort of background
yes,
to it.
indeed.
What were the practical challenges?
Well, the practical challenges...
or steps that you had to take?
Well, the church, of course, had a terrific financial base for establishing schools, and they were recognised by the government. And in fact, if somebody wanted to start a new school in either a new housing area and all of that, very often the land would be provided. The church had an actual collection system on Sundays every morning to collect money, and they could fund it. They had an arrangement that, of course, up to 90% of the costs of establishing the building would be paid for by the state. And the church had been doing this for generations.
Right.
So it was a routine thing for them to establish another school. Our challenge was, where do we start and how do we get into this system, and we have no money.
Yes.
So we had to establish the financial background, how we would collect it. The other difficulty was in the general Dún Laoghaire area, there were no spaces really available on which you could build a school, and particularly if you wanted to have play areas around it.
Right.
That posed an enormous difficulty. So there was no private property that had a big enough footprint that you could build a school and also build the playing fields all around it.
Yeah.
So we had to look in creative ways around that, and we eventually, of course, came up through Hilary Pratt and through her family. We got sort of the space of two houses, which is what this school is built on here, and then there was an open space beside it.
Yeah.
And we could argue that, of course, the open space could be available to the children to play in during the day, when it wouldn't generally be available at the community.
Yes.
And the school wasn't operating on the Saturdays and Sundays, which meant that the open space was available to the wider community then. So it could be a dual purpose there, which provide an open space for the children at school, and then be the open space that was required under the building and planning laws for the community at large.
And who did you need to talk to negotiate that?
Oh my God! It's so we needed to talk to Dún Laoghaire Corporation and all of that. And when we went for planning permission, there were very significant objections to that. And I remember one group put objections in, and the whole project was stalled for quite a while. And we had many meetings down in Mike and Pat Johnson's kitchen, in which we met some of these people.
Right.
And in fact, Monica Barnes' husband, Monica was a supporter of ours. She was a local Fine Gael TD, but her husband was a major objector, and he was a significant force on the council.
And so she was supporting you, but he was objecting.
Yeah, he was objecting because he was a member of the council. He was an elected member, and
what were their grounds of objecting? Can you remember?
I can't. They just didn't want us. They didn't want a school here, and you see, they would be overlaid with. I think they fundamentally had a religious objection that they didn't want a multi-denominational school coming in. Because I remember going to mass in Dalkey one time, and the priest getting up and saying, "We all know what a Catholic school is. We all know what a Protestant school is. But what is a multi-denominational school?" So they tried to shame you out of so you were pagans.
Yeah.
You were outside. You were outsiders. And of course, people don't like change.
Yeah.
They were sort of a bit fearful of change. And that was a major issue. The church didn't want change because they had a power base, and that was an established power base. I don't think it was particularly thought through by them, but they had this way of being and way of thinking in which they didn't want it interrupted, and they didn't want us queering the pitch for them. So there was what I would call embedded intellectual inertia was a major problem in all of the institutions of the state. The civil servants didn't want change because they said, how can we give you people money to build a school? Sure, the parents, you'll be gone when your children are gone from the school. I said, well, that happens in all the other schools too. No, but the church is there, and the church is there. So that they had an overall body, which you call the equivalent to the bishop. I can't remember the name, but the overall grouping, which provided continuity, and they didn't think that we could provide continuity and all of that. So we had all of these.
Then it was just time, because Áine, when she was here, mentioned the pamphlets that were put into people's houses when a survey was done to check how what kind of response.
That's right. Oh yeah. Well, I was. One of the difficulties was, of course, they said the response was, nobody wants this.
Yes.
You're just a jumped up crew of middle class Dalkeyites
Yes.
who want to impose this on the people.
Yeah.
And we said, no, we're not. This is a constitutional right. This is something that of right people have. They have a right to decide how their children are educated. And Burke, particularly when he was minister, he was of that sort of that thinking that these are just middle class people who want education their way on the free.
Yeah.
And we were saying, no, we want to exercise our constitutional rights to have our children educated in the same way as you're expecting them to live when they leave the school, because they're expected to go and be with people in society of all different religions and have a deep respect and a high regard for them, and yet you won't let them do that at school.
Right.
And the only place they would allow that at school was was one school, and it was the church for the children with mental disability.
Okay.
So they felt, of course, that if they had mental disability, it wouldn't, this whatever it was wouldn't come into play. So we had institutional inertia in the church, in the state,
Yeah.
in the local authorities, and probably in the population. So we did the survey,
Yes.
and because the survey was to say whether or not there was a demand for this type of education in the locality, and that was a superb survey. And we did it 1 house in 4 in the locality, and it was done with incredible precision, and we got the results of that, and nobody has ever contradicted those results.
Yeah.
And that gave an overwhelming response of a majority of people in favour. And the most important element of that is that the people who didn't want to send their children to this school
Yes.
allowed the right of those who did to have that sort of a school,
Yes.
which I think showed the ultimate fairness and sort of equality-mindedness of the Irish people in this area, that though they wouldn't make that choice for themselves, they would not prevent the choice
Yeah.
being made for their neighbours. And that was a very important element in that. During that time, of course, the Knights of Columbanus distributed these leaflets to everybody, and the local priests were around terrifying the people. Don't fill out that form, don't do a response, you're only supporting the thing if you give a response.
Yeah.
And we had to come around and say, no, please make the response. And of course we didn't want to be interfering with the response to people, well, we just wanted them to give us an honest reply.
Yes.
But they were under pressure by the local clergy not to fill in the response. And then the Knights of Columbanus put on this thing, I think, called The Snakes Are Back.
Yes.
And they accused us of being communists, abortionists, socialists, anything you could think of. But we were the snakes who were back in Ireland. St. Patrick had got rid of them in the year 432 or whatever it was, and we were the modern sort of incorporation of the snakes in Ireland. We were going to undermine the faith of the people by doing this.
Yeah.
And it was awful. And
That must
some
have
of
been
us
hard
were,
for people to deal with.
it was very difficult because people were named in it, and
Yes.
they were named as who they were. But I mean, that was it. That was the way it was at the time.
And what was the thing that helped you to change? That get past all this fear?
Well, persistence and a sort of a belief in the cause, if you like.
Yes.
And we also doing a lot of the work together. I think the cause became greater than any individual.
Right.
So that I remember, you very often in organisations say, oh, sort of, why are you always on the radio? Or why did you get an interview on TV and I didn't get one? I can say absolutely firmly, amongst the core group of 5 or 6 of us, there was no feeling like that. It was just, hey, you got on the radio. That's the cause. It wasn't an individual thing. It ceased to be an individual sort of success. It was a success for the cause. That was very important.
So people were happy if one person got more airtime.
Absolutely,
Because-
it didn't matter.
Yeah.
That was the cause. And the other thing was that we also had an internal rule that we would try and respond to every criticism, but we wouldn't do down and be negative and be nasty about people who might be nasty to us. That was not going to be our way. We wouldn't respond in kind to any of the criticisms. So when the Knights of Columbanus put around the stuff, we didn't respond in kind.
Yeah.
And that would have been sort of very often a natural impulse. But we
Yes.
have to control those natural impulses because it would have damaged the cause.
Okay, and well, it worked very
It worked.
successfully.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And time was very important because, particularly with civil servants and bureaucrats, time is eternal for them. And of course, for any people who are on a project, they have a time scale and they really want to try and achieve. I mean, you get that in corporate life and every other life, that you have a time scale.
Yes.
But if you eliminate the time scale from the cause, then in fact you will become incredibly more powerful.
Right.
And I think that was one of the things we did. And we accepted that some of our children may not be educated in this system, but that we were still going to fight for it so that others would be. And I think that was a very important
Well, that was a
element.
big give, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Because most parents are most interested in education when their children are going to school.
Yes.
And then with their children's lives, they progress onto another level and onto another level.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to keep the focus going on that cause.
Yeah. And so what would you say to Educate Together now? You know, say, because there are some of the issues, well, that's, you know, we've heard the same issues are there today. There is still a dominant church influence. There's still issues about money is a big issue.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, you have to be patient. I think we have sort of 70 or 80 schools now within the system of 3,000.
Yeah.
We're still a tiny percentage, but it's a non-zero number, which is a very significant number, and that's we've done an enormous amount. And particularly Paul Rowe's leadership over the last number of years has been absolutely superb in achieving what we have achieved.
Yeah.
Now, I think we just have to progress. The challenges are equivalent and the same, but they're in a different environment, a different society, so there'll probably have to be slightly different solutions.
Right.
But I think we have to persist. We can see what's happening at the inertia factor in the transfer of schools to the patronage of Educate Together. And whereas Bishop Diarmuid Martin is saying, yes, I want to transfer a lot of them, and the state is supposedly neutral on the transfer, although Rory Quinn pushed it very much to try and push that in. But there is significant inertia, because when you get down to the local level, the politics become incredibly local, and if you like, the national politics cease to matter, and they say, well, I don't want that happen to my school.
Yes.
And it's like the NIMBY system, not in my backyard.
Yes.
And so that's the challenge now. I think in time it will come. People will accept it, and will accept that, in fact, that these things are not a challenge to their core beliefs, and inclusivity is not a challenge to one's core belief. That in fact, and that when we have more inclusivity in our society, and our society include the various values, and we've seen that in various ways how much Ireland has progressed, particularly in the marriage referendum recently.
Yeah.
That sort of inclusivity, and it's a deep challenge. It's a deep challenge to your core belief to say, okay, I accept that, and then to live with the consequences of that later. But in fact, if you don't do that, you're denying some of your co-citizens the right to live their lives according to their way of living, which is no challenge to your way of living.
Yeah.
You have to allow that.
And I think that group, the group who were the S Equality group, took a very similar approach. They responded to criticism, but they didn't bring anybody down.
Exactly.
And
I think that's very important.
Yeah.
You respect the individuality of the people who are making the criticism, but not the criticism, but not the people.
Yeah, very good. So what would you say is a core part of the ethos of Dalkey School Project or Educate Together?
Well, pluralism and having regard for people with different beliefs, and learning to live with those beliefs, and that's still a big challenge. It's not. It's not. You can't just say it, but actually, how do you live it, and how do you live it, and how do you change in your heart how you respond to a person that is different in this way. It's if they have physical differences and all of these other differences, you can see them.
Yeah.
But if you like, a belief is something inherent and core within you, and it's more difficult to put your finger on it, and it's more easy to be scared of it.
Right.
And it's to get over that internal fear of saying that I can live with my neighbour, and who is my neighbour? You go back, if you want to go back, you can say, who is my neighbour is all mankind of every description.
Yeah.
So, sort of, enjoy that and include it. That's the way it is.
Fantastic. And you had was it only one of your children that ended up?
Oh no, they all. Well, Siobhan was my eldest. She was they were both in BC Place, Deirdre and Siobhan.
So some of them
and then one of them went on to the Presbyterian church, and then Deirdre was in the Portakabins around the vocational school for a while.
Right.
Neither Deirdre or Siobhan ever lived in a permanent school. They
Okay.
were always itinerant school children in
Yeah.
that sense. And those early days of the Dalkey School Project they were itinerant students, if you like.
Okay.
They were going around to different locations. But Ben went to the Dalkey School Project right through.
Yeah.
And then through the regulation that we had here that on first come, first served,
Yes.
Misha, we delayed his entry and he lost his place in the Dalkey School Project.
Okay.
But thank God he went in with Mary Stewart
Right.
in the Monkstown Educate Together.
Yeah, yeah.
And now my grandchildren are all in the Monkstown.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, 3 of them. So that's great.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And what would you say children going to Educate Together get? What do you see from your own children or from meeting others?
They can be an example to their parents about inclusivity and
Right.
about actually respecting the other people that they live in the world with.
Yeah.
And that. And I think children are actually much better at that when they're not programmed in
Yeah.
advance. And they can teach adults a big lesson
Yeah.
in how to do it. Now, of course, they have their own little
Friendship
sort of
issues,
friendship
yeah.
issues and
Growing
fight
up.
issues and
Yeah.
battle issues and all of that. But they're essentially of a different nature. They're about normal human interaction.
Yeah.
They're not about belief systems.
Yeah.
But I mean, children are very accepting of
Yeah.
each other in most ways.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
very true.
Yeah.
And before I let you go, I want to go back to the money issue because
Yes.
that's a recurring,
Yeah.
I suppose, challenge for Educate Together. How did you get past having no money?
It was difficult. We had the country market, which you probably
Yes.
the others have talked about, and that was a
Yeah.
great thing. But that was both a fundraising effort and a bonding
Yes.
exercise. So we bonded there together every Saturday morning, and we made a certain amount of money. Now, the amount of money we made from that was not proportional to the amount of work that went into it.
Yeah.
But the bonding that took place there gave us the strength to do all of the other things.
Yeah.
And we eventually, when we got planning permission, we were faced with a big issue. We had to raise, I think, 100,000 pounds or euros at the time. I can't remember which denomination it was. And I had been involved with a fundraising effort in University College Dublin, and the fundraiser there, I asked him, look, you'll have to help us free time. So he came on board, and we held a very public meeting, and we organised the fundraising effort on the same format as we did the survey quite a number of years previously. And
Yeah.
everybody had to go out, and over a weekend we had to get commitments from people for that. And I remember at one stage a small committee in the bank, I went down to the bank and I borrowed £1,000, and people were saying, now we have to get 10 people of £1,000.
Yeah.
And they were saying, we'll never get. And I said, okay, well, here's the first one. So we had the first one
Okay.
on it. And then people said, oh God, once you get one, you can get another, you can get another, you can get another. So that sort of attitude went out. And over that weekend, we got commitments, I think, for up to 90 or 100,000 euros. And that meant it was a very intense effort.
Yeah.
And people gave small amounts. Some people gave larger amounts.
Yeah.
They gave whatever they could, but we got the money, and that actually got us over that hump.
Yeah.
And I think the Department of Education never thought we'd do it.
Yes.
I think in a way that's why they gave us permission, because these people are going to fall at this hurdle.
Yes.
And we knew, of course, if we did that would put the whole project back many
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
But we actually
You
surmounted
made it.
it and got
Yeah.
it.
And what was it like then when the school was first set up?
It was one of the most emotional experiences of my life to be there.
It was down in VC Place, was it?
Oh yes, in
Yeah.
VC Place we got that was the first school.
Yeah.
And in VC Place we a group of us got together and bought the house.
Yeah.
And then we had to convert it. And over the summertime, Bill Hyland was digging drains with Michael
Yes.
Johnson and getting things done. It was great.
Yeah.
And I still have a sort of picture in my memory of Siobhan and Deirdre
Yeah.
arriving on that first morning with Florrie Armstrong, Sheila Harrington, and Jane Dorn.
That's right, the first three teachers.
That were there, and it was just a great air of celebration.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was just celebration. It was celebration and relief, and
Yeah.
there was so much more still to be done at that stage.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there was just a terrific celebration
Yeah.
at the accomplishment.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, we're trying to capture some of this and get ready for the 40th birthday celebration.
Oh, yeah.
So you were using the word celebrate. We want to have plenty of that, you know,
Right, yeah.
to put together. So thank you very much for being part of this video. It's great.
Yeah, you're very
Yeah.
welcome.
I
Very
think we
welcome.
captured loads there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I would like to repeat just the first
Yeah.
the first part when you get involved, like
Okay.
the personal thing with your wife
Yeah.
from different religions. So just to get it again.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just-
so if I
just
ask
get
the question
first
again.
question,
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So when you were setting up Dalkey School Project, what was it that made you decide you needed to get involved?
Well, I had lived in North America, in Canada and in the United States, and I came back to Ireland in 1971. And my first child was born in 69, and the second was born in 71. And of course, immediately say, well, where do they go to school?
Yes.
And I had married a woman who had an Episcopalian tradition, belief
Right.
tradition, which was effectively Church of Ireland in Ireland. And the issue was what school could they go to in which her tradition would be equally recognised to mine. There was no problem recognising mine
Yes.
in Ireland. There was a plethora of schools they could go to. They could all get that. But there was no system or no school they could go to in which each one would
Yeah.
be recognised,
Yeah.
and they were both acknowledged. So I was sort of wondering how can that be, and how can it, how can we solve that problem? And it seemed intractable at the time.
Yeah.
And because you were just a singular person wondering about this, faced with this system out there in which it seemed to be impermeable, and it seemed to be there was no possibility of change in it, and there was nobody saying we should have that sort of school. And then one day my secretary came into me. I was working in Dublin. Marlene said to me, I think you'd be interested in this project. There's been a meeting tonight with Mike and Pat Johnson set it up, and it's about having a school at which all children can go to together.
Yes.
And their backgrounds and religious beliefs would all be regarded.
Yeah.
I said, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
So I went along to that night, which is a very important thing for anybody in any office to take the advice of your secretary,
Yes.
because they probably know better than you what you should be at.
Right.
And so I went along to the meeting and spoke at it and became involved in it. I think by the end of the night I was the treasurer of the organisation. So I'd taken an office, but it just matched exactly what I was looking for at that moment, at that time, and I could make a very strong commitment to it. The other thing was that I think that was important about that too was that a number of the people who were very heavily involved at that time had come to the project through St. Patrick's in Dalkey.
Yes.
And no matter where you have an experience in this thing, there's baggage.
Yes.
And I think that what they saw from me was, I have no baggage because I wasn't involved in the St. Patrick's thing. I was coming in just as a pure outsider with the idea of this is what I wanted. So that was the contribution I was able to make to it in terms of thinking about it and thinking in that way. I remember Bill Hyland saying that to me, and I was delighted that it was seen in that way.
Well, it's very good because the different founding members we've talked to have come with particular reasons why they got involved.
Yes.
Yeah. So this
sure.
is another piece of the
another
jigsaw.
aspect. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in fact, we're just samples of people who are thinking these things around society, but had no way of articulating it or no avenue to express it. I think that was it. And then for me, finding the Dalkey as it was then, this multi-denominational, this was an expression of a belief that I had, and I wanted to do something about it. And here was an opportunity to actually shift something in Irish society, and we could do it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, thank you very much for doing it, because we sent out 837 letters to confirm interest this year. So
holy mackerel, really? 837.
Yeah. Now
How many places do you have?
We've 30 places.
30.
30 places.
Well,
that's how many people are expressing interest.
Well,
in
that
our
means
school.
we need more schools.
Yeah.
That's all. We just need a lot more schools.
Yeah.
Of this sort. We don't need more school buildings. We need more schools that have this ethos and that have this way of doing it.
Yeah.
And I think the development, for instance, of the ethics program, or the religious
program and the
religious education Learn Together program, that was a tremendous breakthrough, and that was very difficult to do in the early days to get it. Anya was very involved in that. We've had Father Good, who had been sort of kicked out of Cork and was out in Kenya someplace on the missions,
Yes.
and they were able to do multi-denominational education out in Kenya,
Yes.
but it wasn't good enough for Ireland.
Yeah.
So he helped us in a program
Yeah.
that sort of incorporated it. And of course, very often, I think one of the difficulties was that religion and ethics were the same thing,
Yes.
and people couldn't separate them.
Yeah.
So that, in fact, it was one of the things we did. We didn't know we were doing this, or at least I
Right.
didn't anyway.
Yes.
But that's actually what was happening, which was
Yeah.
a very good development.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because
Yeah.
the department is now looking at looking for feedback on
Yes.
religion and ethics
Yeah, so I understand.
nationally.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Dalkey School Project did a lot.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
leader
A
again,
leader.
and continuing to lead.